Okay, so in this chapter, we are continuing the blocking stage just for a little bit, and then we'll start to refine our shapes just a tiny bit. We don't want to go too far yet. We're teasing you here.
We'll get there.
Yeah. This is actually an important angle that you need to check often, I think, is the one from below.
Oh, yes.
It helps you to see the curvature of the mouth, the curvature of the eyelids, and, you know, the sort of depth of your nose. The nose is a little easier to gauge, but especially the mouth, like the way the mouth curves around the face. That's a tricky one to judge. So an angle from below is really important, I think.
I feel, in general, people only look at it from like the angle you're looking at now, straight on, and maybe not even from the back. But I really recommend looking at it from top, below, like get the odd angles out there, because then you can truly evaluate your model in ways you normally want. It might be one of these where it looks a bit weird. You can't figure out why it looks a bit weird.
And at this stage, you can see there's actually still some pretty strong indications of planes in the face. These are obviously some things we'll go in and soften out, but it helps to, you know, make sure that you put all your shapes in the right place.
When it comes to reference as well, I prefer using scans for this. Scans are fantastic. There is a site called 3Scan Store, which is amazing. You can just look at they have tons of busts as well and faces. Well, you don't even have to get their models. You can just look at their screenshots of the models.
It's really a nice reference.
It's such a good one, because if you're dealing with facial reference of, let's say you're trying to get a likeness of somebody. First of, likeness is insanely hard, but also you might not be looking at the same kind of reference. You might be looking at somebody after they had a rough day. Maybe they're 10 kilos heavier or lighter. It might be 5-10 years between the pictures. You have lighting, you have sort of scattering, specularity, makeup, they're wearing a hat. All these kind of things makes it really hard to really look at the reference. Yeah. But scans, they are brutally honest.
They don't lie.
They don't lie.
We have someone that we know that was doing a likeness sculpt of an actor. But the problem was a lot of the pictures were taken with different focal lengths. Oh, yes. Like Henning said, 10, maybe 20 years apart. And the face starts to change a lot. And even if you shoot someone with a 35mm versus a 50mm camera, then the face is going to look completely different.
Yeah, what you can often do, let's say you are doing a likeness sculpt, you can find a scene from a movie which is shot with the same camera, where they're rotating their face, because then at least you know that. Yeah. That's going to be the same focal length. I didn't even know focal length was a thing until starting into photography, and it's not really something you necessarily have to deal with in 3D. You're just doing like 3D camera, but it dramatically changes the way somebody looks.
One thing I want to point out here at this stage is you can see how low res the eyes actually are, but it doesn't matter to me right now, because when I look at it from a little bit of a distance, I can still gauge whether or not the eyes sit correctly in the face, how I want them to sit. You know, I can still get an indication of the lids. I don't need to distract myself with details at this point, basically. So I try to keep it fairly low res.
Like, it's easy to up-res this model, because the fundamentals are strong. It's very hard to make a high poly model which has this level rushed. It's very hard to make that look good.
Yeah. And now slowly we're sort of transitioning into building up the volumes stage. I don't know if that's an official stage, but let's pretend that it is.
No, it is.
Where start to soften out some of the planes, some of the harder planes in the face, and trying to build up some of the volumes that I can see on my reference. So the references that I'm using is, like Henning said, likeness sculpts are tricky, and I really don't like likeness sculpts. It's a lot of tweaking for me. There's not a lot of gratification from likeness sculpts, and it's really, really hard. So what I tend to do is I pick different things from different references, different models, different actors, that kind of stuff, and then I sort of merge it into a face that I think looks nice. For this, the primary reference in the beginning is going to be Henry Cavill. Cavill, right?
Henry Cavill, I think.
Cavill? Yeah,
I think
Superman.
Superman, the most handsome man who walked the earth.
Yeah, and
He
later,
has a good face.
He does have. His chin is amazing.
Yeah.
And then later, I start to mix in. Let me see, Kratos and Nathan Drake as well. So I take in some 3D references as well that I think have cool things about their face.
Yeah. That's really cool if you're going for something more designed. You want to be careful with that as well. You got to know what you're doing if you're doing something like Kratos, because that's obviously something which is more stylized.
It's already been interpreted.
Exactly. Nathan Drake as well. Like he's more of a real person, but he's also more of a fan. I don't think he's based on a scan.
No, yeah, I think in the latest version, like Uncharted 4, they based it off of an actor, like a scan, but then they modified it to look like Nathan Drake or something.
So if you are doing based on like fictional characters, you totally can, absolutely can. Just be aware that they have already been interpreted once.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess from here on out, it's going to be a lot of tweaking of proportions. It's trying to get the right feeling across. And you will see later that the face will start to change pretty drastically, actually, which is interesting. But again, looking at this angle from below, it's something when you start to build up, especially the brow, that thick brow, almost Neanderthal-like thick brow. That's another thing that can contribute to the manliness. And here in the beginning stage, this sculpt is looking a bit androgynous, but we will try to fix that.
Make him supermanly.
Yeah, basically.
If your sculpt is looking weird as well, like we've been doing a lot of sculptors with students. It's always the same reasons. You skipped the fundamentals. Yeah. You went into too high poly too quickly. Speaking of high poly, just to add a bit more resolution, but you went into too much detail too early on. That's basically always the issue. You skipped like adding the shape, like the mouth barrel and the shape of the eye and the roundness of it, getting the main volumes. If you skip that, it's never going to look right.
No, you see this time and time again where the face is amazingly detailed. There's pores everywhere and wrinkles, but it's still kind of broken as a face.
It might work pretty well in a dark shot where you have all this super close up in a dark shot with sexy lighting of maybe like a mouth or something like that. But you shouldn't rely on that. That's like you can cheat it to make it work. But your model should ideally work from all angles in neutral lighting. Yeah. Like the ZBrush here. This is like it's a bit of an exaggerated material, but it shows off the model really well. A bit too well.
Yeah, sometimes. And for the ear, oh man, ears. Just look up an ear. Yeah. Do a few ear studies. I'm basing it off of Mr. Henry's ear to begin with, and I think I start to diverge at some point when I think it doesn't fit what I want with the model anymore. But in the beginning here, it's very much just based off of his ear.
One thing which is interesting with the ears is just how thin they are. It's like if you were to feel your own ear, it's like a few millimeters thin. Yeah. And that's also why you see so much subsurface scattering. And that's what everyone does when they're doing realistic humans. Subsurface scattering in the ear. Because now it looks realistic.
Yeah, that's how you measure realism.
Yeah. But it's really just because they are really, really thin. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I'm doing when I'm sculpting faces as well. I just touch my own face. I have a mirror, and I have a vanity mirror from IKEA on my desk, and I just touch my own face, just seeing how it sounds so dumb when you're talking about it, but like I just feel what parts are firmer and what parts are softer, like the cheekbones and the forehead, very hard, and then you have like the mouth area, which is pretty soft, and I think that's important because I'm treating that very differently when I'm sculpting. I'm treating bony areas very differently compared to very soft areas, like just how the skin folds as well over like the skull. The skin is just kind of, there is no fat there. It's like you're wrapping skin over like just a stone or something, while on around the mouth region it's like wrapping skin around something far softer.
Ears. It's a trick. Also, this is a thing that I think people often neglect, is the back of the ear. Because, well, obviously, I mean, you don't really see it that often. But I still think, and it's something I'll be reworking for a while, the connection to the ear is quite strange. If you feel on your own ear, try to feel how the ear connects to your skull. It's a weird shape. It doesn't just attach. It's very, very strange. And also there's a lot of individual variation with the earlobe. Like some people have a connected earlobe. Some people have like a flappy earlobe. Like my lobe is pretty flappy. We had a teacher once who said that he felt that European girls in particular had like attached earlobes. I don't know if there's any validity to that statement, but you know, that's an observation he made.
Yes, that's pretty interesting observation. Never thought about that. But see, this is exactly what we were talking about before when it comes to perceiving stuff. I mean, if that's true or not, at least he was observing that.
Yeah.
Because he was aware that earlobes are different. If you're not aware that earlobes are different, you're just going to use the same generic air for everything. But if you are, you're going to be observing, well, specifically the earlobe.
Yeah.
For every single part of the face, it's kind of like, in the beginning, you're just being like, it's an eye, or it's an ear. But once you start to observing it, you're starting to look at the fat deposits, you're starting to look at the specific shape, the different ethnicities, everything there makes it so different and varied.
You can see the ears slowly starting to take shape.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know all the terms for the ears. You know, there's a tragus, anti-tragus, there's
Helix,
anti-helix, that kind of stuff. But
the ear hole.
the ear, like, I don't need to know that kind of stuff.
No.
I just need to know the shape of it.
Yeah.
It's not something that I prioritize in terms of naming, but I prioritize it in terms of shape.
That's basically a debate when it comes to anatomy as well. That ultimately the most important thing is do you understand the shape of it?
Yeah.
When it comes to the face, I've been sculpting faces for quite some time. I don't really know any of the names because when it comes to body anatomy for the torso and all that, you see the muscles so specifically you can identify this is the bicep. When it comes to the face, it's way more wishy-washy. It's way more. You can't necessarily see the muscles of them. You can see some here and there, and they do determine where wrinkles fall and all that. But it's not like a bicep, which is you see the biceps being flexed.
Another thing is you've seen it a few times now using the transpose lines, which is different from the 3D Gizmo, which is default in ZBrush now. I still use the transpose line quite a lot, also because it's nice for measurements. So it's really easy to sort of like just draw a line so you can see where your proportions kind of correct. I do that from the ear to the brow and the nose, for example, a lot.
Yeah, plus the Gizmo was a weird one.
Yeah, who knows what that is. And now we actually have enough detail for our eyes to actually build up some proper lids, which was something we were missing for a while. And here there's so much variation. You know, some people, you know, I guess the average would be that the inner part of the eye ends where the outer part of the nostril is, but in this, for my reference here, the eye went past the nostrils, so I take it past the nostrils. It's so much individual variation. I think you have to be careful with sticking too close to this is how you make a face.
Yes.
Because, you know, it could be drastically different from one person to the other.
Yeah, there are really no general things to... Well, there are some general things like, you know, everyone has a skull and you build up like that. But really be careful if somebody gives you feedback and being like, oh, but the eye is generally like this is more generic. This is why I prefer to have a lot of reference and often of the same person, because then you have something specific to refer back to. Like you have some photographic truth you can actually lean on. And not just general proportions from Andrew Loomis' book from the 50s.
Which is a great book, to be fair.
Fantastic.
But, you want to vary it a little bit.
Yeah, you use that as a starting point. You use some general rules as a starting point, and then you add individual variation on top.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking at this, it just looks like Morten is just sculpting all this from imagination. But like he's been saying, like you reference for everything.
Every time you see me pause, that's me looking at reference. Yeah. Every time I'm not sculpting, that's me looking at reference. And I look at the reference quite a lot.
Like I can pretty confidently say that without spending a lot of time getting reference, I would not be able to sculpt a realistic human face. I could sculpt something which kind of could pass as humanoidish, but it would lack so much specificity and.
Yeah, because every time you look at your reference, you realize, oh right, yeah, the lid does like this. Like one thing I kept noticing when I was looking at Henry, Mr. Superman, was the way he has quite heavy not eyelids. That's like the fatty deposits above the eyelids, but that's connected to the brow. And before, I've always thought of that fatty shape as just one round bulbous shape, but it's actually not. There's like two planes in it. So like one like just sits close to the eyelid, and then there's the actual fat deposit which sits right up underneath the brow. So if you try to find some references for like heavy brows or heavy eyelids, you probably notice that too. And
this is exactly what I mean. This is kind of a quantities game. That if you're trying to do the perfect one, you can't.
Like I haven't noticed it before now. Yeah. Like until I started the sculpt, I didn't know that. So it's you notice new things every time.
Exactly. And in the beginning, you're going to be noticing. What you're going to be noticing isn't specifically, there's a plane change from this to this. You're going to be noticing, the eyes are in the middle of the face. And the nose has this shape to it. It's a triangular shape. And the mouth is fairly round. And the lips are here. And these are kind of things. And then you just get more and more granular. To the point you are going to be obsessed with sudden plane changes or certain fat deposits. And when you discover that, you're like, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of awesome stuff to discover in the face.
But I mean, so far as well, technically, it's been very simple.
Yeah, so far it's been move brush, clay buildup, and twice Damien standard.
Yes.
I think, But that's generally the tools I use for 99% of everything.
Yeah. We have a free video on introduction to ZBrush as well, and I truly believe that if you're watching that one, you can learn everything you need to know about getting started in ZBrush. Yeah. Not, of course, everything pipeline related and all the little tricks here and there, but in terms of being able to start sculpting basically anything you want to sculpt, because the reality is when it comes to sculpting, it's not a tool. You spend some days learning the tool, you spend some time getting familiar with that, and then it's all just how well do you understand the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Take a traditional sculptor or somebody who's fantastic at life drawing, give them like a few days with ZBrush, and they're going to produce amazing work. It's kind of funny looking around. He looks like a pest dispenser.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's what's going to happen at the end of this tutorial.
He's just opening his mouth. It's like Canadian South Park style. Look at how weird it looks now without perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. It sometimes makes it easier. So this is the fat deposit I was talking about right there. It sometimes makes it easier if you want to evaluate your forms in a certain way, but just for the love of everything that's holy, remember to turn it off again, because otherwise you'll start tweaking your face and it's going to look weird. And this is actually an important thing to get in. Ideally you should probably get this in earlier, but it's your pupils. Just because it doesn't really do anything in terms of your sculpting, but it adds so much personality. Like as soon as you get the pupils in there, your face starts to change. Your entire, now all of a sudden, there's a soul, there's a personality to it.
So motivating.
Yeah.
And also when you're showing this to other people, they're like, it's a person and not just an empty polygonal sketch.
You can see there's a slight indication of eyebrows as well. Again, it's an important thing to get in there so you don't have a shaved monkey.
Exactly.
Because that looks weird.
People forget this, that eyebrows are a thing.
Yeah.
Like if somebody were to shave your eyebrows out in real life, you would probably panic like crazy, and you would complain to your friends how weird you look and have a story about how some dude shaved your eyebrows off. and you're like, but I forgot to do eyebrows in CG.
Yeah. It's a heavily underrated feature of the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like anything else, it's like a volume. When you look at people sort of like 3/4, you start to realize that the eyebrow makes like this super pointy shape. So it you know, it obviously deforms the silhouette of your character. So I think it's very important to get in there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be where you're getting in all the specific, all the little tiny hairs or anything.
No,
It's just the volume, just the plane change for it. Yeah, this is exactly what Martin was talking before. If your model looks exactly the same perspective and orthographic, then you're in trouble.
Then you did something wrong.
Yeah, that means that the moment you sculpt, or you take your sculpt into a rendering software to render it through a camera, your model is going to look super weird.
Yeah.
Not that you're not going to be missing details or anything like that. It's just going to be that the proportions of the entire thing is fundamentally broken and you can't really fix it.
So this is one of the few times where I use Damien Standard again, just to carve in the lid, between the lid and the brow.
Such a good brush.
I will also use it for defining the lid, you know, like the plane of the lid. I'll use it for that as well. But very rarely, actually, I use the Damien Standard brush. But it is a good brush. It definitely is a good brush.
Yeah, I use it whenever I need to add a lot of wrinkly skin or real like clear fatty deposits, get some sharpness into it.
Yeah.
But for nearly all my sculpting, this is all clay buildup. I had a period where I sculpted only with the clay brushes as well, just straight up default clay without any alpha, which gives you a really nice planar feel to it. But I switched now; it's all clay buildup.
Yeah, so this is all of this is sculpted with clay buildup with no alpha. For me, I like the feel personally, and it has this soft feel. I don't need to do too much cleanup afterwards. I think the default alpha can be super awesome in the beginning when you're doing the initial stages of your proportions and getting in the planes, because it's really good at defining planes.
Yeah. Yeah, I use I do the same. I just but also I kill the alpha sometimes at the end of the project as well, just where I really want to soften off.
Yeah.
You can see here, we weren't really using there was no smooth brush used. It's basically just working up the volumes with the clay buildup with no alpha, because then you kind of get the smooth brush for free, just so you're refining volumes that way.
It comes later on when in the later chapters where maybe there's a lot of brush strokes in the model. I will use the smooth brush quite aggressively but only to sort of soften out between those brush strokes, but try to preserve the form. That's one of the things the smooth brush can be a little tricky for, because it tends to kill your form quite a bit. Yeah. So I try to limit my use of it, but I will do when I need to clean up form.
Yeah, I think it's super important what we're talking about now when it comes to brush strokes. People get so attached to them. They're like, oh, it's this cool surface variation. Yeah, it might be true, but they need to serve the form. If it's this cool surface variation, which does serve the form, like it helps to get some kind of skin feeling across. Yeah. Awesome. But right now you can see you have a lot of brush strokes on just the forehead.
Yeah, the forehead. That you don't want that kind of brush stroke feeling. You know, that's not good.
No, if they work with the form, awesome. But if they're just random strokes, you just need to get rid of them. And then the smooth brush is amazing. And he's a handsome man.
And he doesn't even look like Mr. Henry Cavill yet. And he won't ever look like Henry Cavill. So that's spoilers.
Yeah, we're not trying to mimic that. Because then this entire tutorial will be 16 hours long, and we will us being like, yeah, so we moved the point half a pixel up.
Yeah, and I might never finish, actually.
Yeah. And it would be all just, for the entire one. Can't do that.
No. This actually, you can see that you're starting to define the shape very clearly. From the cheekbone down to the barrel of the mouth, you've got this funnel-like shape that goes down. Defining that shape is again one of those things that can make your sculpt look a little more manly. Where in a woman you would probably have a softer. So this is more that this part now is kind of concave. Concave, yes. And a woman would probably be more flat or maybe smooth out a little bit more.
Yeah, this is a very manly face right now. He has like the superhero face, the cheekbone, and
it's interesting, right? Because it's like. It's definitely a manly face, but with feminine elements. Yeah. I think the lips do a lot here in terms of his...
Yeah, they're very lush.
Yeah, they're very, very lush lips.
And his eyes are soft. And his eyes are... his eyes, they're...
making them more lush now. Crap.
His nose is pretty manly.
Yeah.
I think if you were to smooth off if you smooth off the cheekbones and like the funnel shape there, and smooth off the nostril, I think this would look very feminine.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank God for that big manly nose.
Yeah, he does have very soft and loving eyes.
Yeah, he's a gentle soul.
But I think that's something that, as the face starts to change in the later chapters, the eyes is something that sticks. That soft, almost sad feeling. Like that sad feel is always good for a loving man.
Yeah, a bit melancholic.
Yeah, he has a little bit of that Asian, like puffiness girl eyes. Maybe he went to Korea and got a little treatment. But again, here you can see, now I'm switching to the ear. It's trying to not stay in one area for too long. Everything pauses because I look at my reference. I just want to make sure that, okay, does it look kind of what I want it to? Nope, it doesn't. So you start to change it again. And actually an important thing to notice within the ear, the way all the shapes connect, those weird, like, it almost look like a weird fetus, or maybe it could be like the plains of Africa inside the ear. They connect to the, is that the helix? The one that goes around?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they connect inside of the helix. Just look up the helix and it'll make sense, I think. So it's like, it's trying to like connect it all together. It's all grown together. There's no like hard plane within the ear where things just stop.
Such an alien shape.
It is a very weird shape, but it's also very weird to try to describe it.
Yeah.
Because we don't really have like, I guess we have a little bit of like a vocabulary to describe the ear, but it's a strange thing.
It's curvy.
Yeah.
Curvy and weird. I think it's so important what you're talking about. Don't be in one place for too long, because then you're gonna end up having like amazing eyes, but everything else is lacking.
Yeah.
I prefer to take everything up at the same level. It's kind of like a progressive render, where like a bucket render where just finish the eyes, move on to the nose.
Yeah.
But I prefer just to like denoise everything. It goes from very rough where everything gets a bit less rough and a bit less rough.
Yeah. And you can see the thinness of the ear starting to poke through now. Starting to kill some of that volume to make it look more like a real ear.
It's so funny.
Every time. But yeah, again, using the transpose lines to really make sure, are my measurements correct? Or like not my measurements per se, but where I want things to sit in the face.